8. Ludwig Feuerbach. In the same letter Marx acknowledges the receipt of the collection to which he had contributed his first political work. This collection appeared in 2 volumes under the title, Anekdote zur neuesten deutschen Philosophie und Publizistik, and it was published in Zurich at the beginning of March, 1843, by the Literarisches Kontor, which Julius Froebel had made into an asylum for those authors who had been compelled to flee the German censorship. In this collection the old guard of the young Hegelians took the field once again, but its ranks were already wavering. In the van was Ludwig Feuerbach, the daring thinker who had already thrown the whole philosophy of Hegel onto the scrap heap, who had declared the absolute idea to be nothing more than the deceased spirit of theology and thus a belief in pure phantoms, who found all the secrets of philosophy resolved in the contemplation of humanity and nature. The preliminary theses on the reform of philosophy which he published in the Anekdote were a revelation for Marx among others. In later years Engels dated the great influence which Feuerbach exercised on Marx's intellectual development from the Essence of Christianity, Feuerbach's most famous work, which was published in 1844. Of this book Engels declared that one must have read it in order to realize its liberating effect. The enthusiasm was general and we were all instantly followers of Feuerbach. However, Marx's writings for the Rheinische Zeitung reveal no trace of Feuerbach's influence, and although Marx did, in fact, enthusiastically welcome the new ideas, whilst making 1 or 2 critical reservations, this was not until February, 1844, when the Deutsch-Französische Jahrbucher appeared and indicated even in its title a certain relation to Feuerbach's ideas. The ideas of the preliminary theses are already contained in German The Essence of Christianity, and therefore the trick which Engels' memory played him would seem to be of very little importance. But it is in reality not quite so unimportant because it tends to misrepresent the intellectual relations between Feuerbach and Marx. Feuerbach was only at ease in rural seclusion, but he was no less a fighter on that account. With Galileo he regarded the town as a prison for speculative minds, whilst in the freedom of rural life the book of nature was open to the eyes of anyone with sufficient intelligence to read it. This was always Feuerbach's defense against all the reproaches directed against him on account of the secluded life he led in Bruckberg. He loved rural seclusion, not in the sense of the old peaceable maxim that he is fortunate who lives in obscurity, but because in seclusion he found the strength necessary to carry on the fight. It was the need of the thinker to compose his thoughts in peace, away from the noise and bustle of the town which might have distracted him from the contemplation of nature which he regarded as the great source of all life and of all its secrets. Despite the rural seclusion in which he lived, Feuerbach was in the forefront of the great struggles of his day. His contributions had given Rouhet's publications their point and trenchantcy. In his Essence of Christianity he pointed out that man makes religion and not religion man, and that the higher being which man's fantasy creates is nothing but the imaginative reflection of his own being. However, just at the time when this book was published Marx had turned his attention to the political struggle which led him right into the hurly-burly of public life, as far as it was possible to speak of such a thing in Germany, and the weapons which Feuerbach had forged in his writings were not suited to such surroundings. The Hegelian philosophy had already proved itself incapable of solving the material problems which had arisen during Marx's work on the Rheinische Zeitung, when the preliminary theses on the reform of philosophy appeared and gave Hegelian philosophy the coup de grâce as the last refuge and the last rational prop of theology. The work therefore deeply impressed Marx, although he immediately made critical reservations. Writing to Rouhet on the 13th of March he declared, "Feuerbach's aphorisms are not to my liking in one point only, namely, that they concern themselves too much with nature and too little with politics. Still, an alliance with politics is the only way in which contemporary philosophy can become a reality. But I suppose it will happen as in the 16th century when the nature enthusiasts were faced with another set of state enthusiasts." Marx's objection was reasonable enough, for in his preliminary theses Feuerbach mentioned politics only once, and even then his attitude represented rather a retrogression from Hegel than an advance on him. The upshot was that Marx determined to examine Hegel's philosophy of law and the state as thoroughly as Feuerbach had examined his philosophy of nature and religion. Another passage in this letter to Rouhet reveals how strongly Marx was under Feuerbach's influence at the time. As soon as he had realized that he could not write under Prussian censorship and that the air of Prussia was altogether too oppressive, Marx decided to leave Germany, but not without his future wife. On January 25 he had written to Rouhet inquiring whether it would be possible for him to find something to do on the Deutsche Boat which Rouhet intended to publish in Zurich. However, owing to his own expulsion from Zurich, Herwer had been unable to carry out his plan. Rouhet had then made other proposals, including the joint editorship of the renamed Jahrbucher, suggesting that when his editorial purgatory in Cologne was at an end, Marx should come to Leipzig to discuss the place of our resurrection. In his letter of the 13th of March, Marx agreed in principle but expressed his provisional opinion on our plan as follows. After the fall of Paris, some proposed that the son of Napoleon should be made regent, whilst others suggested Bernadotte as the ruler of France. Whilst still others were in favour of Louis Philippe, but Talleyrand answered, either Louis XVIII or Napoleon. That would be a matter of principle, anything else would be intrigue. And I should call everything with the exception of Strasbourg an intrigue and not a matter of principle. Voluminous books are not for the people, and the best we can do is to issue a monthly. Even if the Deutsche Jahrbucher was permitted to appear again, the utmost we could manage would be a feeble imitation of the late lamented, and that is not enough today. A Deutsch-Französische Jahrbucher, on the other hand, that would be a matter of principle, an event of consequence, an undertaking to inspire enthusiasm. In this letter one can hear the echo of Feuerbach's preliminary theses, in which he declares that a real philosophy in harmony with life and humanity must be of Gallo-Germanic origin. The heart must be French and the head German. The head must reform and the heart revolutionize. Only where there was movement, emotion, passion, blood and feeling could there be any spirit. Only the spirit of Leibniz with his sanguinary materialist idealist principle had rescued the Germans from their pedantry and scholasticism. Replying to Marx's letter on the 19th of March, Rouhet declared himself in complete agreement with the Gallo-Germanic principle. But the settlement of the business side of the arrangements took up a few further months.